Okay, so let's start now, and sorry for that. Let's go with the third chapter, that is your how to use the different types of functions in Oracle. Uh, how can we use the different types of single row functions, character functions, and all those. So in the last couple of chapters, what we have actually discussed is that we understand about how to use the how to write a basic select statement and how to read the data by using a logical operators and what is the precedence of the logical operators and how to sort the data that we have checked it. So in the next chapter, it's basically which talks about how to use the customized functions. So function is nothing but which takes the different arguments and it performs at an action and result it will use the resultant value. So this is called as a function. So how do you uh, classify the functions is that functions are divided into two types. One is called as a single row function and another is called as a multiple row function. Single row function, and let's say another one is called as a multiple row functions. So when you talk about the single row functions, so it's basically for each row it will return one result. I mean one result per each row, that is one result per each row, which it is a single row function. So if it is returning one result per multiple rows, one result per multiple rows, then this is your multiple row function. So multiple row functions, we will basically discuss them in the group functions. So that is nothing but a next chapter, chapter number 4 we'll talk about. In a single row functions, we'll talk about the different type of functions such as character functions and then the number functions, date functions, general functions, and the conversion text. So let's talk about one by one. Let's say you have a character functions first to start with, and then you also have the number, numeric, and all those. So let's talk about one by one. So basically the character functions, again, it is divided into two things. So one is your case manipulation function and another is a character manipulation function. Case manipulation functions and another you call that as a character manipulation functions. Character manipulation functions. So let's take a look at the case manipulation functions one by one. So these are all basically if you're actually passing a string, either it will convert them into uppercase or the lowercase. So before we talk about this character manipulation functions or case manipulation functions, we need to talk about the dual table. See, the dual table is nothing but this is called as a system owned table. So sys owned object, we call it as sys owned object. When I say this object is owned by the sys user, basically whenever this is a by default, this table gets created. When you try to read the data from this dual table, it's a kind of a one by one row. I mean, you'll have one row and one column in this dual table. So try to use it. It's a dummy column will be there and the value will be X. So you can always use for any kind of a calculations, you can perform it on the dual table. So let's say now, how could I use the case manipulation function? So it's that, so select, let's say I have a last name, first name, and all those things in the employees table, right? So if I want to convert a complete last name into uppercase, so how would I write it? So we are talking about the first function called as a upper function. So in Oracle, what happens is that if you are using an upper function, it converts all the string into an uppercase. So let's try to see the complete difference. So upper function takes only one argument. So when you say upper of last name, so this will give you the complete uppercase statement. So when you try to execute this, so this will give you able, and complete thing is being converted as an uppercase. So similarly, if you try to see the lower function, so basically the lower is a function which converts all the cases into a lower case. So when you say last name, so it's basically converts uh, complete uh, complete data, whatever is there in the last name, into complete lowercase. So when you look at it, so let's say I have able, so you have a first letter as a capital letter. It's like a camel case. So when you see after applying the lower case, it has actually converted as a lower of last name, which is able to this. So this is more about the upper function and the lower function. So there is another function called as a init cap. So init cap is nothing but the initial letter as a capital letter. Whatever the word that you use, so it will give you the initial letter as a capital. So I'll try to use this function against the, I'll try to use this function against the, let's say you have a string called as a hello world. Okay. So we know that every time we pass the string, that has to be enclosed in the single quotes, right? So now what should be the output? Init cap also takes the only one argument. So when you try to use from dual, so let's say if you're trying to execute, what should happen now? H and W should become capital. So it's basically first letter in each word will be a capital letter to start with. So that is about the init cap function. So basically these things we will start using it. See, yesterday we have seen one example wherein when we are writing a query saying that where last name is equal to lowercase king, we couldn't retrieve the data because of the case sensitivity. So in those scenarios, so in that scenario, what will happen when you are writing a query? So let's say select last name, comma salary, comma let's say the job ID from employees, where let's say I don't know in which case the data is stored in my table. So how could I write it? Either I can convert complete data, whatever is there, into lowercase, lower of last name, equal to let's say king. So you don't know in which case the data is being stored here. So I'm basically converting the complete last name into lowercase and then executing this. So what will happen? This will give you the data, even though it is stored in the camel case here. I was able to convert and then get the data whatever is required. So whenever you don't know in which case the data is stored, because the data in the table level is a case sensitive, so what you can do is you can always use the lower of whatever the function or upper of whatever the function that you can use and bring the data from it. So three functions what we have seen in the case manipulation function, or your lower function and your upper function, and then the init cap. So each of them takes the one argument or one column as an input, and then it will give you the output. So that is how you use the case manipulation function, case manipulation functions. So that's the first thing that we have here. So the second one will talk about the character manipulation function. So what do you mean by manipulation? Which is nothing but changing or modifying that. So we have a various functions like a concatenation, substring, length, instring and all. So we'll understand one by one function. Let's say you have a concatenation function. This function takes the two arguments, argument 1 and let's say argument 2. Both are the strings. So basically what it will do is it will combine both the arguments and it will give you the result. Let's say you have the requirement, you want to combine the both last name and first name and alias it as a full name and retrieve all the other details. So how would you use a concatenation function? So select, let's say if you are using concatenation of what is a last name comma first name. So I'm concatenating the both last name and first name. Let's say I'm using this in the full name. I'm aliasing this as a full name. Let's say if you need even the other details like a job ID, so salary from job ID and salary from, let's say you want to read the data from employees table. So when you try to execute, so this will give you the complete details about this one. So full name, job ID, and then the salary. So now the question is, suppose let's say if I want to concatenate the last name and first name by comma. See, I want to get the output something like this. So now there is no space or there is no comma. So I want to get the output something like this. So how could I achieve that? By using the concatenation function. Basically it takes only two arguments. So how can I get the comma in between this? So this can be achieved by using a nesting of the functions. Means by using a two concatenation functions we can achieve this. So how I could get it is because, so first you need to concatenate the last name with a comma, right? So you want to concatenate the last name with comma. So now your output, how your output will look like? So it's basically last name comma comma. Now the result of this function can be passed as an input to the another concatenation function. So you can use one more concatenation function and then you want to concatenate with the first name whatever is being used. So when you look at this, so first this function gets executed, then followed by this one. So when you try to use this way, it will give you the data. Let's say a kernel comma donut. So this type of function usage is called as a nested functions. So we call them as a nesting of the functions or a nested functions. So whenever you are writing this kind of a queries, what happens is that first your inner query gets executed. First your first inner query, then we can't call it as an inner query. It's basically the inner argument or inner function which it is being used, and then this will be used as a next one. So that's how concatenation function works. So now let's take a look at another one. See, another function what you have is a length function. So length function also takes only one argument. Suppose, let's say if I want to identify the employees whose last name length is more than 10 characters. So how would I write the query? So if you use this, select, let's say the last name, comma job ID, comma salary from employees. See, when we are talking about these functions, any function, it can be used in the from clause and it can be used also in the where clause. So how would I write it? Let's say where length of last name, where length of last name is greater than 10. So I want employees details whose last name length is more than 10 characters. So try to get this. So this will give you the data. There is only one employee who has a length of a last name which is greater than 10 characters. So this is how it works. So that is the about the length function. So let's talk about the another function called as a substring function. So substring function basically takes the three arguments. Argument 1 is a string, and it will talk about from which position it has to read, and then the length, basically how many number of characters it has to read. So you have total, basically you have three things together. So when we talk about this, let's say I want to read only the first three characters of the last name. So how would I read it? So you can write the query. So first three characters of the last name. So select last name, comma, substring of, let's say, using a last name of 1, comma 3. So 1 is the first position and number of characters that you want to read is a 1, comma 3. So from, let's say, which last name column is there in which table? From employees table. So try to execute this. So we'll try to find out. See here, you have a last name of an employee as Abel. So now we wanted to read only the first three characters. So character position, how it takes is that A is 1, B is 2, and then the E is 3, and then followed by this 4. So it will read the position as from left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4. From left to right, if you see, so all the names. So even if you look at the Bates, so first three characters, Bell first three characters, Bernstein first three characters, likewise you can do it. So suppose, let's say, if I have to rewrite this query, I want to read the 4 characters from the second character. How would I write the query? So from the second position you want to read it. So use second position, and the number of characters that you want to read is a 4. So just assign the 4 and then try to execute this. So this will give you from the second character or the second position, it will give 4. Basically, when you are given 4 from the second position, if you count the characters, you have only 3. So basically it doesn't have more than 3 characters, that's why it is displaying only 3. So likewise you can use the substring function. So basically the substring function takes 3 arguments and then do it. So let's move on to the next one, that is about the in-string function. So in-string function also, it takes basically the 4 arguments. First one is a string. What is the use of in-string function is that it will give you the position of the character. So suppose in a last name, if I want to find out when A is appearing or when B is appearing or when C, so position of the character. So what will be the output of substring function is a character, output of in-string function is an integer. It will give you the position 1, 2, 3 like that. So let's say how it will do. So string, which character you want to look for and which position and the from which position, yes, from which position and how many occurrence. See, in a given string, that character might appear in different type of occurrences. I mean, maybe multiple occurrences it is there. So which occurrence you want to identify. So let's say, let's take the simple example. Okay, select. You have an in-string function, instr. I will take the example as hello world. Okay, hello world. And out of this, I want to find out the occurrence of L from the first position, second occurrence, or let's say third occurrence. So what will be the output of this? So if you try to analyze, so this is the first character, second, third, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. 10th position. This is basically the 10th position. From the first occurrence, when is a third occurrence of L is there? From the first position. These are the first occurrence, second occurrence, and this is the third occurrence, right? So this basically gives you the value as a 10. So it is appearing in the 10th character and then this. So what happens in hello world, let's say if I am giving you from the 7th character and the third occurrence. So this basically talks about the from first position. When I say 7, from the 7th position. Where is 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. From this position, I want to identify the third occurrence. Do we have the third occurrence in this string? You have only one occurrence. What about the third occurrence? So when it doesn't find anything, it returns the position as 0 because it cannot identify the third occurrence from the 7th character. So it gives the position as a 0 basically. That's how it will work. So the in-string function uses it will give you the position of the character which you are looking for. It is not only it will use for a single character, you can also use this for a word also. Suppose let's say if I want to find out from the when does a world is occurring. I mean, let's say I want to look for a word called as a world. What from the first position, first occurrence when it is appearing. So you can also give the complete word. It's not only the character. So if you see this, it gives you the same. So you can also use that in using this, right? So in-string function gives you the position of the character, whatever is there. So any questions so far? Any confusion? All right. So let's move on with the next one. Next one is about the understanding of the trim and understanding of the replace function. So when we talk about trim function, trim basically removes the spaces on the both the sides of the string. Removes the spaces on both the sides of the string. On either of the sides, you can call it both sides of the string. So if it has any space, it will remove it, but in between the word, it doesn't remove. Let's say if you have multiple words, in between the words, it doesn't remove. Let's take the simple example. So select trim off, and I am giving spaces here, and I'm giving a space here as well. I'm providing a spaces, and when you use from dual, so check the output. It basically removes the spaces. Now try to edit it. Here I don't have any space, and even before the string also I don't have any space. And also there is a other type of function called as a ltrim, will remove the spaces on the left side of the string, and rtrim will remove the right side of the string. So this is a use of ltrim function and the rtrim function in using it. It removes the spaces on the both the sides of the string. Right. Another function which we have is the replace function. So basically the replace function will replace the character or a word. Hello? Is it happening for everyone? Do you guys hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. Hello?
Okay, thank you. I think there is a problem at your end, Priyanka. Okay, thanks. Thank you. You can mute yourself. All right. So when you use the replace function will replace the character or a word. Character or a word. So how it works? Let's say if I have to use any it takes basically the 3 arguments. Okay. So I have, let's say I have something called as a word called as a Jack and Jew. So this is a word which I have. I want to replace J, capital J, whatever you have. This is a case sensitive. Okay, so I want to replace this by BL. So how would it works? So it's basically, if you replace it, it becomes black and blue. So whenever you want to replace a character, or you can also replace the word when you are using a replace function. So this is how it works in using it. So that is more about the different types of case manipulation functions and the character manipulation functions in using this. So next one is about the number functions. So how do we use a number functions? For today, we'll just learn about number functions. Tomorrow, we'll talk about the date functions and all. So that completes the complete set of character functions. See, you need to be good with all these things. Basically, when you go to the Informatica Power Center also, you'll see the similar kind of a function, exactly with the same names. So if you are comfortable in using all these functions, then it will be easier when you go to the Informatica Power Center. Basically, Informatica Power Center uses the exact replica of almost all the function what you have in Oracle. So it will be the same thing. Whenever you want to perform any operations on the file or anything, so it will always be useful. Next thing is about the number functions. So yes, so number functions. If you'd like to talk about the LPAD and RPAD, which is part of this one, okay, let's quickly look at what do you mean by LPAD and RPAD. LPAD is nothing but which pads the character on the left hand side. RPAD is nothing but which pads the character on the right hand side. So when you say LPAD of, I have a salary column, and let's say the total number of digits must be in the salary is 10, and I'm actually using that as a star. See, basically it will find out the number of characters or number of digits in a salary column. If it is less than 10 digits, that many number of stars will be appended. So let's try to find out what is how it works. So from, let's say you have the employees table. So try to use this. So when you say this, you have, see, salary is here is a 4 digits. So that's why it has padded 6 characters on the left hand side. Basically, it has padded 6 stars. And let's say you have the another one as RPAD of, let's say, salary of 10. And then if I'm using a star here, what happens is that it will pads the characters on the right hand side. Pads the characters. So if you see 2600, it is basically padding the characters on the right hand side. So LPAD and RPAD function works in the same way. So you have an example in the hands-on exercise. So try to complete that. So you'll get more even better idea about how the LPAD and RPAD are being used. So whenever you are actually looking for some formatting, right, you can always use a LPAD and RPAD functions and do it. So the next one, we'll talk about two things. One is a round function and another is a truncate function, and the next one is a modulo division. Modulo division. So as you know, the round function works, it just rounds the value, decimal values. So in Oracle, round function takes two arguments. It will take the number column as an input and number of decimals. So how many decimals you want to round it to. So how we'll use it? So let's say if you are using select round of, let's say 45 point, I think what is the number we have, 9267 something, whatever the number you have, and I want to round it to the 2 decimals. So if you see, if it has to round it to the 2 decimals, third digit is greater than 5. So it will be rounded into the 45.93. So when you try to use it, so from dual, so try to use it, so it will become 45.93. So it basically, how many number of decimals that you're giving, it rounds it to that many number of decimals. So let's say if you are using 45.926, basically you have decided to round it to the integer value. So what can you do? So that if you try to use it as 0, so when you try to give this, so this basically gives the 46. So what happens with 45.555? It basically gives you 45.55 only. It doesn't change this. So let's say if you'd like to write this, select and round off 45 point, let's say 55, okay, whatever the 5. You want to round it to 2 decimals. So it basically doesn't rounds it to the nearest value because it is a 5, right? So it will give you 45.5.
Greater than 5.
Yeah, greater than or equal to 5 looks like. So probably this is changing it to 45.96. Sorry, 56. That's how round function works. So basically, if you move on to the trunc, and even the truncate also takes the number as an input, and how many number of decimals that you want to truncate or truncate up to, how many number of decimals you want to truncate up to. So what will happen is that when you say select round off, what is the value is that if you use the same calculation, so sorry, this is a truncate, so truncate. See, your what is difference between the truncate and the round function is that round will take you to the nearest decimal value, but the truncate doesn't do that. It will just simply trims off the decimals. So what will happen? What is the, if I have to round it to 2 decimals, it's definitely 45.92 will be the output of this because it just removes it. It doesn't rounds it to the nearest value. Suppose if you are using to 0, let's say if you are using a truncate of 45.92678, let's say if you want to round it to 0 decimals, it will just trims off and then gives you the value as 0. 40. So this is how a round function and the truncate function works. Modulo division function basically takes the 2 number columns as an input. So number column as an input, number, and this is also a number. So basically when you try to do this, select, let's say modulo division will give you the remainder of the 2 numbers. It gives you the remainder of 2 things. So when you try to use modulo division function, let's say if I'm using 1600 divided by 500, so what will be the remainder? 100. 500 into 3, which is 1500. 100 is a remainder. So when you try to execute it, this will give you the 100. So now if I give you a task, let's say I want to display all the employees whose employee ID is an even number. So how would you write the query? So it's basically I need to find out all the employees whose employee ID is an even number. So employee ID, comma, let's say last name and salary, comma, job ID, from which table we have all these employees, where modulo division of this employee ID. So if you are dividing it by 2, if the remainder is 0, that is called as an even number. So when you try and execute this, so this will give me all the employees whose employee ID is an even number. You can check it here, all are even numbers. So likewise, you can use even the number functions as well in the SQL. So if you want to look for odd, just equal to 1. So that gives you the employees whose employee ID is an odd number. So these kind of questions they'll actually ask you in the interviews, very basic questions if you're going for a SQL interviews and all, okay, which is required. So I'm going to stop it for today, and in case if you have any questions,